In the gleaming halls of justice, power flows from the gavel, not the badge. On a rain-slicked street in downtown Boston, 5 police officers are about to learn this lesson the hard way when they corner an elegantly dressed African-American woman outside a courthouse. They see what they want to see, someone they can intimidate, someone they can control. They ignore her calm protests, dismiss her warnings, and treat her with the casual disdain reserved for those they deem beneath them. But beneath her composed exterior lies 30 years of judicial experience and an unwavering dedication to constitutional law. She's not just any citizen caught in their web of prejudice and power. She's Federal Judge Victoria Marshall, one of the most respected legal minds in the First Circuit Court of Appeals. What follows is the story of how a routine abuse of power becomes a watershed moment that rocks the entire Boston Police Department to its core. In just 72 hours, these officers will learn that true authority doesn't come from carrying a badge, it comes from upholding the law they've sworn to protect. Judge Victoria Marshall's morning began as it had for the past 3 decades, arriving at the courthouse before sunrise. The security guard, Tom, nodded respectfully as she passed through the metal detector, her credentials barely glanced at. After so many years, the empty halls echoed with her measured footsteps, the building still waking to its daily rhythm of justice. Her chambers felt like a second home, the oak-paneled walls lined with law books and the subtle scent of leather and paper hanging in the air. The morning light was just beginning to filter through the tall windows when her senior clerk, James Chen, appeared with her traditional first cup of coffee and the day's docket. "Quite the schedule today, Your Honor," James said, spreading the files across her desk with practiced precision. "The Edwards discrimination case at 10, 2 sentencing hearings at 2, and the Thompson appeal needs your final review before tomorrow's deadline." Victoria sipped her coffee, studying the meticulously organized case files before her. The Edwards case had been weighing on her mind for weeks, a class action discrimination suit that could affect hundreds of employees at Boston Municipal Corporation. The plaintiff's evidence was compelling. 6 denied promotions despite exemplary performance. Reviews, all following a pattern that spoke of systemic bias rather than individual oversight. "What did you find in the Thompson precedent?" she asked, opening the massive Edwards file. Inside, post-it notes in James's careful handwriting marked key points of law and testimony. "The parallel is stronger than we initially thought," James replied, pulling out his own notes. "The Ninth Circuit's ruling specifically addressed the neutral criteria defense that Boston Municipal is trying to use. Judge Rodriguez's opinion effectively dismantled the argument that facially neutral promotion criteria could shield an organization from discrimination claims when the impact clearly showed racial disparity." Victoria nodded, making her own annotations. In the margin, her morning routine shifted into its familiar pattern, reviewing briefs, discussing strategy with her clerks, preparing for the day's proceedings. Her second clerk, Sarah Patel, arrived at 7:30 with the latest circuit, court decisions and a stack of pending motions that required immediate attention. "The U.S. Attorney's Office called again about the Martinez sentencing," Sarah said, organizing the new materials on Victoria's desk. "They're pushing for the maximum, but the pre-sentencing report raises some mitigating factors we should consider." The morning unfolded in a cascade of judicial duties, conference calls with other judges about pending cases, final preparation for the Edwards hearing, and a steady stream of decisions on motions and procedural issues. Victoria's reputation for thoroughness meant every document received her full attention. Every argument was considered from all angles. At 9:30, her third clerk, Michael Robinson, knocked on her door with an urgent update. "Your Honor, the attorneys for Edwards have uncovered new evidence. They're requesting a brief conference before the main hearing." Victoria checked her watch, already feeling the day's schedule tightening. "How significant is the new material?" Internal emails suggesting the promotion criteria were specifically designed to limit advancement opportunities for minority employees, Michael replied, handing her a fresh stack of documents. They only obtained them last night through a former employee. This development would normally energize Victoria. It was exactly the kind of evidence that could crack open a discrimination case. But something felt different today. Perhaps it was the growing pressure of her packed docket, or the weight of so many lives hanging on her decisions. Or perhaps it was something else, an unease she couldn't quite name. Her security badge sat on the corner of her desk, its federal seal catching the morning light. The identification card, with its embedded chip and holographic markers, represented not just access to the courthouse, but the very authority of the federal judiciary. In a few hours, that same badge would lie ignored in her handbag as 5 officers. Demonstrated how quickly authority could become abuse. For now, though, she was Judge Victoria Marshall, preparing to ensure that justice was served in her courtroom. She straightened her robes and gathered the Edwards files, unaware that by day's end she would find herself on the other side of the law, confronting a system that too often forgot its fundamental purpose, to protect and serve all citizens equally. The morning briefing room at Boston Police Department's District C6 smelled of stale coffee and frustration. Sergeant Mike Callahan scanned the internal memo for the 3rd time, his jaw tightening with each bullet point. Increased community, oversight, enhanced accountability measures, mandatory de-escalation training, more bureaucratic handcuffs from brass who'd forgotten what it meant to work the streets. Oh, can you believe this shit? He tossed the memo onto the table where his team gathered for their pre-shift briefing. Officers Ryan Drake and Steve Martinez exchanged knowing looks, while rookies Jason Cooper and Derek Williams shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Another day, another complaint about aggressive tactics, Drake said, leaning back in his chair. At 32, he'd spent enough years on the force to adopt Callahan's cynicism, but not enough to let it completely harden him. Maybe if these community activists spent a day in our shoes, they'd understand why we can't always play nice. Callahan nodded toward the district map on the wall, covered in red pins marking recent incident locations. Downtown's becoming a war zone, and they want us to ask pretty please before making arrests. Commissioners more worried about Twitter outrage than officer safety. The memo had arrived that morning, prompted by a series of complaints about excessive force in the district. 3 incidents in the past month had drawn media attention, all involving minorities, all resulting in charges being dropped. The brass was getting nervous, talking about body camera reviews and civilian oversight boards. "Listen up," Callahan addressed his team, particularly eyeing the rookies. "We've got extra patrols around the courthouse today. Some protest about police accountability or whatever. Keep it tight, keep it professional, but don't let anyone give you shit. We're the thin blue line between order and chaos in this city." Williams, fresh from the academy and still eager to prove himself, raised his hand. "Sergeant, about the new de-escalation protocols." "Save the academy textbook for your reports, kid," Martinez cut in. 15 years on the force had left him with a perpetual scowl and a deep distrust of change. Out there, you follow your gut and watch your partner's back. That's all the protocol you need. The briefing continued with standard updates. B. On lookout for a serial car thief working the area. Watch for drug activity around the T stations. Maintain high visibility near government buildings. But the underlying tension remained. A current of resentment running through every word. Cooper, marking his 6th month on the force, studied the complaint statistics projected on the wall. Something about the numbers bothered him, a pattern he couldn't quite name. But questioning patterns wasn't encouraged in C6, not since Callahan took over the shift. "One more thing," Callahan said as the briefing wound down. "Internal Affairs is sniffing around again. Some lawyer filed a formal complaint about profiling. You know the drill. Body cams on, reports detailed, everything by the book, at least until they crawl back to their office." Drake smirked. They should spend less time investigating us and more time investigating the actual criminals. The morning sun had fully risen by the time they hit the streets, splitting into their assigned pairs. Callahan with Drake, Martinez with Cooper, and Williams working a solo foot patrol near the courthouse. None of them could have predicted how their dismissive attitude toward oversight would come back to haunt them in just a few hours. Their patrol cars pulled out into the morning traffic, the internal memo lying forgotten on the briefing room table. Its final paragraph, unread by most, contained an almost prophetic warning. Officers are reminded that their authority stems from public trust. When that trust is broken through misconduct or bias, the entire system of justice suffers. Evening descended on Boston's federal courthouse, bringing with it a steady autumn rain that turned the granite steps treacherous. Judge Victoria Marshall stood in the building's entrance, courthouse security badge still hanging around her neck, watching sheets of water cascade from the modernist facade. The Edwards hearing had run hours longer than expected, leaving her mentally drained but satisfied with the day's progress. "You should have let me call you a car, Your Honor," James said, appearing at her side with her coat and briefcase. "The weather's only getting worse." Victoria smiled, taking her belongings. 2 blocks to the parking garage won't kill me, James. Some rain might actually help clear my head after today's testimony." She slipped the security badge into her handbag, alongside the case files she intended to review at home. Still thinking about the HR director's cross-examination? His whole testimony felt rehearsed, like every answer was crafted by corporate lawyers to dodge the real issues. She adjusted her coat against the chill. "I'll see you tomorrow, 8 sharp." The first drops hit her face as she descended the courthouse steps, her heels clicking against wet stone. The street lamps were already on, creating halos in the misty air. Few people ventured out in this weather, leaving the usually busy sidewalks nearly empty. Officer Williams, stationed near the courthouse entrance, watched her departure with mild interest. He'd been posted there all afternoon, monitoring the small group of protesters who'd dispersed hours ago. Reaching for his radio, he made a routine check-in. "Command, Unit 7. All quiet at the courthouse. Most staff cleared out." Through the rain, he noticed a group of teenagers hanging around the parking garage entrance. His training suggested they were harmless, probably just seeking shelter from the rain, but procedure required him to report any suspicious activity near federal buildings. "Be advised, possible loitering situation at the Morton Street garage." The radio crackled. "Roger that. Units 3 and 4 are in the area. They'll do a drive-by." Victoria was halfway to the garage when she heard the approaching police cruiser. Its lights were off, but she recognized the distinctive sound of its engine echoing off wet buildings. Years on the bench had attuned her to the subtle indicators of law enforcement presence. Officers Callahan and Drake rolled past slowly, surveying the scene. Through the rain-streaked windows, they saw what their prejudices wanted them to see: a well-dressed black woman walking alone at night, her designer handbag a likely target for the teenagers they'd been warned about. "Looks like we got here." "Just in time," Drake said, pulling the cruiser to a stop. "Those kids were probably waiting for someone exactly like her." Callahan nodded, already reaching for his door handle. "Martinez, Cooper, cut around the back of the garage. Make sure our friends don't have any escape routes." Victoria noticed the officer's approach in her peripheral vision. Their body language set off warning bells honed by decades of observing law enforcement in her courtroom. They moved with the casual arrogance of men accustomed to unquestioned authority. "Ma'am!" Callahan called out, his tone carrying that particular blend of authority and condescension she'd heard too many times before. "This isn't a safe area to be walking alone right now." She turned to face them, maintaining the composed demeanor that was her trademark. "I appreciate your concern, officers, but I'm perfectly fine. I'm just heading to my car." Drake moved to flank her, creating a subtle but unmistakable barrier between her and her destination. "We've had reports of suspicious activity around here. Mind if we see some identification?" The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Victoria. Less than 50 yards from the courthouse where she commanded absolute respect, she was being treated like a potential criminal. Her hand brushed against her handbag, feeling the hard edge of her federal judiciary badge, a symbol of authority that would soon shatter their assumptions. But before she could reach for it, Martinez and Cooper emerged from the shadows of the garage, completing the circle of uniformed intimidation. The rain continued to fall, washing away any pretense that this was a routine encounter between peace officers and a citizen they were sworn to protect. The rain drummed steadily against Officer Drake's body camera as he stepped closer to Victoria, its red recording light a silent witness to what would follow. The camera's presence should have been a deterrent to misconduct. Instead, it would become crucial evidence of how quickly authority could morph into abuse. "Let's see some ID," Drake repeated, his tone hardening. "And keep your hands where we can see them." Victoria kept her voice steady, drawing on decades of courtroom experience in maintaining composure under pressure. "Officers, I'm reaching for my identification." She moved her hand slowly toward her handbag, noting how Callahan's hand instinctively shifted toward his weapon, a gesture she'd seen countless times in testimony. "Lady, you're really going to want to move faster than that," Martinez called from behind her. The youngest officer, Cooper, shifted uncomfortably at his partner's aggressive tone, but remained silent. Victoria's fingers found her wallet, but before she could extract it, Callahan stepped forward. "You know what? Forget the ID for now. What are you doing hanging around here this late? The courthouse is closed." "I'm well aware of the courthouse schedule," Victoria replied, her judicial demeanor intact despite the growing tension. "As I was explaining, she's probably casing the place," Drake cut in, speaking to his colleagues as if she weren't there. "Saw those kids earlier? Bet they're working together." The accusation was so absurd that Victoria almost laughed. Instead, she straightened to her full height, channeling the authority that had cowed countless contemptuous attorneys. "Officer, that assumption is both incorrect and inappropriate. I'm reaching for my credentials now, which will clarify—" "Hands up!" Callahan barked suddenly, misinterpreting her movement. "Up where we can see them." The body camera captured it all. Victoria's dignified compliance, the rain streaming down her face, the gradual transformation of a routine stop into something darker. Officer Williams, drawn by the commotion, had joined the scene, completing the circle of uniforms around her. "Look," Victoria tried again, her patience fraying but her voice remaining measured. "This situation is escalating unnecessarily. I am an officer of the court." "Oh, you work at the courthouse?" Drake's tone dripped with sarcasm. "As what? The cleaning staff?" The racial undertone was unmistakable. Victoria saw Cooper wince at his colleague's words, but the rookie remained passive, captured by the body camera's unblinking eye. "This is your last warning," Callahan announced, taking another step forward. "Either you start cooperating, or we're going to have a problem." "Officer Callahan," Victoria said, noting his nameplate, "your conduct is verging on harassment. I suggest you—" She never finished the sentence. Callahan moved with practiced efficiency, grabbing her arm while Drake seized her handbag. The body camera recorded the sharp intake of her breath, the sudden look of disbelief crossing her face. "Stop resisting!" Martinez shouted, though Victoria was doing nothing of the sort. It was a phrase she'd heard countless times in her courtroom, often used to justify excessive force. Now she understood firsthand how it felt to have reality rewritten by those with badges. "This is completely unwarranted," Victoria stated firmly, even as they twisted her arms behind her back. The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, cold steel against her skin. "You are making a serious mistake." Yeah, Drake said, rifling through her handbag. "Everyone's innocent. Everyone's being harassed. Everyone's gonna file a complaint." The federal judiciary badge lay just inches from his searching fingers, its gold surface catching the streetlight. One glance would have revealed their catastrophic error, But Drake was too focused on looking for contraband to notice the credential that would soon destroy their careers. "Got her phone?" Martinez announced, holding up the device. "Probably coordinating with those kids we saw earlier." Through it all, the body camera continued recording. The casual cruelty, the dismissive attitudes, the complete failure to follow proper procedure. What should have been a routine interaction had devolved into a textbook case of police misconduct, all captured in high definition for the inquiry that would follow. Victoria felt rainwater soaking through her coat as they marched her toward the patrol car, her mind already cataloguing every violation of procedure, every abuse of authority. She had presided over dozens of police misconduct cases, but experiencing it firsthand brought a new dimension to her understanding. The system she had served faithfully for 3 decades was showing its ugliest face, and she was seeing it from the wrong side of the badge. Officer Drake pulled out his department-issued notepad, rain spattering against the pages as he began crafting the arrest report. His pen moved with practiced efficiency, transforming reality into a narrative that would justify their actions. The subject displayed suspicious behavior, refused to comply with lawful orders, exhibited signs of potential criminal intent. The words flowed easily, a template he'd used countless times before. Each sentence carefully constructed to protect the officers while building a case against their suspect. In the margin, he jotted additional notes. Possible connection to recent courthouse surveillance, resistant to questioning, argumentative with officers. Victoria watched him right from the back of the patrol car, raindrops streaming down. The window beside her. Through decades on the bench, she had read thousands of these reports, often noting the formulaic language used to justify questionable arrests. Now she was witnessing firsthand how these documents were manufactured. "Hey, Sarge," Cooper called out, holding up Victoria's designer handbag. "You're gonna want to see this." The rookie's voice carried a note of uncertainty that made Callahan turn sharply. "What is it, drugs?" Callahan moved to inspect the bag, but Cooper shook his head. "No, sir, the bag itself, it's a Birkin. Real one, from what I can tell. My sister works at Saks. These go for like 40 grand. Martinez laughed, a harsh sound in the rain. "Well, well, getting more interesting by the minute. Nobody walking around here has a legitimate bag like that." Victoria closed her eyes briefly, recognizing how each assumption, each prejudiced conclusion was digging them deeper into what would soon become a career-ending mistake. The handbag, a gift from her late husband, was now being used to further incriminate her in their minds. "Run her prints when we get to the station," Callahan ordered, making another note in the arrest report. "Bet this isn't her first rodeo." Drake moved to the patrol car window, rain dripping from his cap as he leaned in to address Victoria. "Want to tell us where you really got that bag? Make this easier on yourself?" "Everything I have," Victoria replied with judicial calm, "was obtained through decades of legitimate professional work that you're currently interrupting with this fraudulent arrest." "Fraudulent?" Drake scoffed, adding confrontational attitude to his report. "Lady, you were lurking around a federal building after hours, refused to properly identify yourself, and resisted our legitimate inquiries. Nothing fraudulent about it." Officer Williams, who had remained largely silent, stepped forward. "Shouldn't we at least verify her courthouse employment claim? Maybe call it in? You want to wake up courthouse security over someone obviously lying." Martinez shot back. "She's trying to play us, rookie. Probably figured claiming courthouse employment would make us back off." The arrest report grew longer. Subject made false claims about courthouse employment, attempted to deceive officers, demonstrated continued non-compliance. Victoria watched them work, noting how each officer played their part in this choreography of injustice. Callahan, the veteran sergeant protecting his team. Drake, the cynical enforcer building their paper trail. Martinez, the bitter instigator pushing for escalation. Williams, the uncertain rookie failing to trust his instincts. And Cooper, the newcomer already learning to suppress his doubts. "Transport's ready," Callahan announced, closing his notebook. "Get her downtown for processing. We'll sort out the real story there." As they prepared to leave, a few drops of rain smeared the ink on Drake's report, blurring the words that would soon become evidence in a very different kind of case than he imagined. The document, meant to justify their actions, would instead help destroy their careers. Each carefully crafted lie, contradicted by body camera footage and the truth of who they had arrested. Victoria shifted in the uncomfortable back seat, the handcuffs biting into her wrists. She could feel her federal judiciary ID pressing against her side through her coat pocket, a small, hard reminder of the authority they had chosen to ignore. In a few hours, that same ID would transform this arrest report from a routine booking document into evidence of the most catastrophic mistake of their careers. The holding cell documentation form hung on a clipboard outside the concrete enclosure, its sterile categories reducing Victoria Marshall's identity to a series of checkboxes and fill-in-the-blank responses. Time of booking, 1945. Prisoner status, pending investigation. Personal items confiscated, designer handbag, cell phone, wallet, miscellaneous papers. The fluorescent lights of the booking area cast harsh shadows across Victoria's face as Officer Cooper photographed her for processing. Front view, side view. The camera's mechanical clicks punctuated the routine indignities of arrest. "Name?" Drake demanded, pen hovering over the intake form. "You'll have it shortly," Victoria replied, maintaining her composure. "Along with my credentials, which you've yet to properly examine." "Making this difficult only hurts you," Callahan said, from his position near the desk. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Victoria had witnessed this scene countless times from her bench, officers testifying about uncooperative subjects who turned out to be citizens asserting their rights. The holding cell documentation would record her as combative for simply maintaining her dignity. "Fingerprints," Martinez announced, grabbing her arm with unnecessary force. The ink felt cold against her fingers as he pressed them to the paper, creating the distinct whorls and ridges that would soon send shockwaves through the department. "Run these through the system," he ordered a desk officer. "Let's see what else she's hiding." Officer Williams stood slightly apart, discomfort evident in his posture as he observed the booking process. Something about this arrest felt wrong, but he couldn't quite place why. The woman's calm demeanor, her articulate protests, the confident way she carried herself, none of it fit their assumptions. "Personal effects inventory," Cooper read aloud, cataloguing the contents of Victoria's handbag. 1 Hermes Birkin bag, black leather, 1 iPhone 14 Pro, 1 Montblanc pen, 1 leather wallet containing multiple credit cards, all appearing to be platinum or black tier. He paused, something catching his eye. "Sarge, there's some kind of ID card here, but it's in an official-looking wallet." "Bag it all for evidence," Callahan interrupted. "We'll go through it properly once she starts cooperating." Victoria watched her belongings disappear into evidence bags, each item tagged and logged. Her federal judiciary badge, still unopened and uninspected, vanished into a manila envelope marked "Personal effects, pending investigation." The holding cell door opened with a heavy metallic clang. Inside, a concrete bench protruded from the wall, its surface worn smooth by countless occupants. The cell smelled of industrial disinfectant and stale air. "Last chance," Drake offered. "Give us your name, answer some questions. Maybe we can sort this out quickly." Victoria stepped into the cell with dignified restraint. "Officer Drake, you and your colleagues have made a series of increasingly poor decisions tonight. I suggest you take this opportunity to examine the contents of my wallet thoroughly before this situation deteriorates further." "More threats?" Martinez scoffed, making another notation on the holding cell log. "That's going in the report too." The cell door slammed shut, its echo reverberating through the booking area. Victoria settled onto the bench, her judicial robes now wrinkled from the ordeal, but her bearing unchanged. She had seen this cell before, during her mandatory facility inspections as a federal judge. Now she was seeing it from the inside, noting every detail that would later appear in her scathing review of departmental procedures. Through the cell's small window, she could see Cooper returning to her handbag. His curiosity about the official-looking ID clearly piqued. But Martinez quickly directed him to another task, leaving the evidence envelope sealed, and with it, the officers' careers intact for a few moments longer. The holding cell log continued to fill with routine notations. Time checked. 20:15. Prisoner status, uncooperative. Demeanor, confrontational. Each entry dug the officers deeper into their misconduct, creating an official record of their complete failure to follow basic procedures. The federal judiciary identification card lay flat on Sergeant Callahan's desk, its gold emblem catching the fluorescent light. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence in the booking area grew thick enough to cut with a knife as 5 pairs of eyes stared at the credentials that had just detonated their careers. It had started innocently enough. Cooper, unable to shake his unease about the unexamined ID, had waited until Martinez stepped away before retrieving the evidence envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the leather wallet, expecting perhaps a library card or courthouse visitor's pass. Instead, he found himself staring at the photograph and credentials of the Honorable Victoria Marshall, United States Federal Judge for the First Circuit Court of Appeals. "Sergeant!" Cooper's voice cracked. "Sir, you need to see this. Now." The color drained from Callahan's face as he read the ID, then read it again, as if hoping the words might somehow rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. Behind him, Drake muttered a string of expletives while Martinez stood frozen, his usual swagger evaporating. "Get her out of that cell," Callahan ordered, his voice barely a whisper. "Now." Victoria emerged from the holding cell with the same dignity she carried into it, straightening her suit jacket as Williams fumbled with the door lock. The holding area had grown surprisingly crowded in the past few minutes as word spread through the station. Senior officers appeared from every direction, drawn by the career-ending gravity of what had just occurred. "Your Honor," Callahan started, his voice catching. "We—" "Sergeant Callahan," Victoria interrupted, her tone carrying the full weight of her office. "I believe you have some property to return to me." The next few minutes unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare for the officers. Every item they had so cavalierly seized and logged was now being returned under the watchful eyes of rapidly arriving superior officers. Each evidence bag represented another nail in their professional coffins. "My court convenes at 9 tomorrow morning," Victoria continued, checking her phone as it was hastily returned. "I expect each of you to be present, in full dress uniform, prepared to explain your actions to the federal bench." Lieutenant Sharon Chen burst through the booking area doors, horror written across her face as she took in the scene. "Your Honor, I just heard, please accept my deepest—" "Lieutenant," Victoria cut her off with practiced judicial authority, "I suggest you focus less on apologies and more on preserving the body camera footage from Officers Drake and Martinez. I expect it will prove quite enlightening during the federal investigation that will commence first thing tomorrow." The ID card that had been ignored for hours now commanded everyone's attention. Officers who had walked past Victoria's cell without a second glance now stood at rigid attention. The same credentials that could have prevented this entire situation were now documenting its consequences, as superior officers photographed it alongside the falsified arrest reports for the internal investigation that would follow. "One question, officers," Victoria said, gathering her belongings. "At what point in this egregious series of civil rights violations did it occur to any of you to simply read my identification?" No one answered. Cooper stared at his shoes. Drake seemed to be mentally calculating his pension options. Martinez had the look of a man watching his career dissolve before his eyes. Williams appeared on the verge of tears. Callahan, grasping for any lifeline, stepped forward. "Your Honor, if we could just explain—" "You'll have ample opportunity to explain, Sergeant. To me, to the police commissioner, to internal affairs, and to the federal investigators who will be reviewing this incident. I suggest you spend the night preparing your statements. You'll need them." As Victoria turned to leave, Lieutenant Chen following anxiously in her wake, she paused at the booking area door. "Officers, I've spent 30 years observing law enforcement. From the bench. Tonight, you've given me a very different perspective on our justice system. Rest assured, it will inform my rulings for years to come." The federal judiciary ID, hastily returned to its proper place in her bag, had transformed from ignored evidence into a weapon of professional destruction. Its golden surface reflected the harsh overhead lights, a silent witness to how quickly authority could crumble when justice finally found its voice. The emergency alert to the police commissioner lit up every phone in the command staff's group chat at 9:17 p.m. Urgent. Federal Judge Victoria Marshall wrongfully arrested at courthouse. Potential civil rights violations. All command staff report. Immediately, Police Commissioner Thomas Reynolds was hosting a charity dinner when his phone buzzed. The color drained from his face as he read the message, then quickly excused himself from the table. In 27 years of law enforcement, he'd seen careers end in countless ways, but this was unprecedented. "Get me everything." He barked into his phone as his driver sped toward headquarters. "Body cam footage, arrest reports, officer statements, and somebody better tell me how the hell we arrested a federal judge without checking her ID." The alert triggered an instant cascade of responses. Deputy Commissioner Sarah Martinez, no relation to the officer involved, immediately diverted from her route home. Captain James Rodriguez canceled his son's basketball game. Internal Affairs, Chief Diana Wong left her dinner half-eaten on the table. Inside the precinct, Lieutenant Chen was already dealing with the fallout. "I want every scrap of paperwork related to this arrest," she ordered the desk sergeant. "Radio transcripts, surveillance footage, everything. And get those 5 officers into separate rooms. Nobody talks to anybody until IA gets here." The emergency alert continued to spawn new message threads as it worked its way down the chain of command. All personnel advised, Judge Marshall's arrest is now subject to federal investigation. Immediate preservation of all audio-video evidence. Ordered. Press office preparing for potential media inquiry. Union rep en route for involved officers. Officer Cooper sat alone in interview room 2, staring at his own reflection in the one-way glass. His hands wouldn't stop shaking as he read the alert again. 6 months on the force, and he'd already participated in what would surely become a textbook example of police misconduct. In interview room 3, Sergeant Callahan was frantically trying to contact his union representative. The emergency alert glowed accusingly on his phone screen, each word another nail in his career's coffin. Commissioner Reynolds arrived at headquarters in record time, his bow tie from the charity dinner still hanging loose around his neck. The building was humming with activity despite the late hour, officers and administrative staff moving with the focused urgency that accompanied potential career-ending crises. "Talk to me," he demanded, striding into the command center where his senior staff had assembled. Deputy Commissioner Martinez stepped forward with a tablet displaying the alert, thread, and subsequent updates. 5 officers involved, sir. They detained Judge Marshall outside the courthouse in the rain, escalated to an arrest when she allegedly failed to comply, then held her in a cell for over an hour without properly checking her identification. "Jesus Christ," Reynolds muttered, loosening his tie further. "Tell me there's some justification. Tell me she was doing something, anything, to warrant their suspicion. She was walking to her car, sir, in the rain. That's it." The commissioner closed his eyes briefly, already imagining the headlines. The body cams? Worse than we hoped. Captain Rodriguez interjected, looking up from his laptop. Clear civil rights violations, racial profiling, excessive force. They literally ignored her multiple attempts to identify herself as a federal judge. Where is she now? Left about 20 minutes ago, Lieutenant Chen reported, but not before informing the officers they're expected in her courtroom at 9 a.m. tomorrow, in full dress uniform. Reynolds sank into a chair, the emergency alert still lighting up. Phones around the room as more department officials acknowledged receipt. Each response represented another witness to what might be the most embarrassing episode in the department's recent history. "Get me Judge Marshall's office," he ordered his aide. "No, wait. Get me the mayor first, then the DA, then our legal team, then—" He paused, watching internal affairs investigators filing into the building on the security feed. "Then get me a stronger antacid. Something tells me it's going to be a long night." The alert continued to spread through department channels, its message growing more detailed with each update. By midnight, it had reached every precinct in Boston, serving as both warning and wake-up call. In police break rooms across the city, officers gathered around phones and tablets, reading and rereading the alert that would forever change how they approached routine stops. For the 5 officers who had initiated this cascade of consequences, the alert's signature line said it all. This incident is now classified as a critical command priority. All officers are reminded that authority without accountability is not authority at all. It is abuse. The viral video exploded across social media platforms at 11:43 p.m., captured by a law student who'd been working late at the courthouse. The shaky footage showed the entire encounter in devastating clarity. Judge Marshall's dignified protests, the officers' escalating aggression, the handcuffs, the rain. Within an hour, just Judge Marshall and Shusha police misconduct were trending nationwide. Local news stations interrupted their late programming with breaking updates. The video played on endless loop, while anchors scrambled to provide context. Federal Judge Victoria Marshall, known for her landmark civil rights decisions, wrongfully arrested outside her own courthouse. Officers failed to check her credentials. "You need to see this," James Chen texted Judge Marshall, attaching links to the mounting coverage. The law student's video had already been viewed 2 million times. Below it, comments flooded in from legal professionals, civil rights activists, and citizens shocked by the blatant abuse of power. "I've argued cases before Judge Marshall. She's one of the most respected jurists in the circuit. This is what we mean by systemic racism. Those officers just destroyed their careers in under 5 minutes. The Boston Globe's website crashed from traffic as they rushed to publish their initial story. Federal judge wrongfully arrested. A breaking story of power, prejudice, and police misconduct. Their legal affairs reporter had already compiled a summary of Judge Marshall's most significant decisions, many involving police accountability cases. Inside the precinct, the public information officer fought a losing battle to control the narrative. Her prepared statement, "The department is aware of an incident involving members of our force and a federal judge. We are conducting a thorough investigation," was drowned out by the flood of video clips, tweets, and first-hand accounts now circulating online. CNN picked up the story at midnight. Breaking news: federal judge arrested while walking to her car. Their legal analyst, a former clerk for Judge Marshall, provided passionate commentary. "I worked with her for 2 years. She's brilliant, principled, and now she's experienced firsthand the kind of injustice she's been ruling on for decades." The law student's video continued to spread, each share adding to the growing outrage. Legal forums exploded with discussions about qualified immunity, police reform, and the implications for pending cases. Civil rights organizations issued statements, scheduled press conferences, demanded accountability. Police reform activists seized the moment, sharing the video alongside statistics about racial profiling and police misconduct. "If this is how they treat a federal judge," one viral tweet read, "imagine how they treat regular citizens." The tweet accumulated 500,000 likes in under 2 hours. The 5 officers' names leaked shortly after midnight, despite the department's efforts to control information. Their previous complaints, commendations, and service records became public fodder, dissected by both traditional media and amateur sleuths on social media. "This isn't just about one incident," a civil rights attorney told a hastily assembled press gaggle outside the courthouse. "This is about a system that enables officers to act with impunity, to make assumptions based on race to escalate situations needlessly. The only difference here is they picked the wrong target." Judge Marshall's own social media accounts, dormant for months with routine court announcements, became digital pilgrimages. Supporters flooded her official Facebook page with messages of support, outrage, and calls for reform. Many shared their own stories of police misconduct, turning her page into an impromptu testimony of systemic issues. Local civil rights groups announced an emergency protest for the following morning. "Stand with Judge Marshall," the rapidly circulating flyer declared. 9 a.m. at the federal courthouse. Demand justice. Within hours, thousands had pledged to attend. The law student's video kept spreading, now with added context, commentary, and calls to action. Each new share brought fresh waves of outrage, analysis, and demands for change. News helicopters circled the courthouse, capturing footage for their morning broadcasts. Satellite trucks began arriving, setting up for live shots. By 2 a.m., the story had gone international. The BBC, U.S. federal judge arrested outside own courthouse. Le Monde, American justice system faces mirror. Al Jazeera, prestigious judge becomes victim of police profiling. The viral footage had transformed a local incident into a national referendum on police conduct, racial profiling, and systemic bias. In less than 4 hours, it had accumulated more views than any police misconduct video in Boston's history. Each new view added pressure to a department already reeling from the implications of their officers' actions. And somewhere in Boston, 5 officers watched their phones light up with notifications, knowing that tomorrow they would face not just Judge Marshall's courtroom, but the court of public opinion. The video played on, an endless digital reminder of how quickly justice could turn the tables on those who abused their authority. The Internal Affairs Preliminary Report took shape in the pre-dawn hours, its clinical language barely containing the gravity of the situation. Chief Investigator Diana Wong typed rapidly, her office illuminated by multiple monitors displaying body camera footage, arrest records, and officer statements. Internal Affairs, Preliminary Report Case Number, IA 2025-147, Incident Classification, Level 1, Critical Subject, Wrongful Arrest of Federal Judge Victoria Marshall. Time of Report, 03:15 m. Status, Urgent Initial Findings. Officer Accounts, Conflicting statements regarding probable cause. Multiple procedural violations identified, clear discrepancies between written reports and video evidence. Pattern of escalation without justification. Physical evidence. Body camera footage from officers Drake and Martinez shows complete encounter. Surveillance footage from courthouse external cameras confirms victim's account. Written arrest report contains demonstrably false statements. Holding cell log shows multiple protocol breaches, protocol violations, failure to properly identify subject, unnecessary use of force, false statements in official documentation, improper processing procedures, violation of civil rights under color of authority. Wong paused her typing, rubbing her tired eyes as she reviewed the interview transcripts. The 5 officers had been separated and questioned extensively, their stories already showing cracks under pressure. Officer Cooper's statement stood out. I tried to check her ID earlier, but was told to focus on processing. I should have insisted, I should have. The transcript noted that the rookie officer broke down at this point, requiring a 10-minute break. Sergeant Callahan's interview revealed a different attitude. We were following standard procedure for suspicious activity. How were we supposed to know? His defensive posture suggested a failure to grasp the gravity of the situation, Wong noted in the margins. The report continued to grow as more evidence emerged. Each new detail painted a darker picture of systemic failures and individual misconduct. Immediate concerns: leadership, failures. Sergeant failed to properly supervise junior officers. Clear breakdown in command structure. Multiple opportunities for intervention, ignored training implications. Required diversity training apparently ineffective. De-escalation protocols not followed. Basic identification procedures ignored. Pattern analysis. Review of past arrests shows concerning similarities. Multiple prior complaints against involved officers. Evidence of ongoing procedural violations. Wong added a note about cell phone footage surfacing on social media, providing additional angles of the incident. Each new video clip corroborated Judge Marshall's account while further undermining the officer's statements. Preliminary recommendations: immediate suspension of all officers involved, complete review of department arrest procedures, emergency, retraining for all patrol units, external audit of recent arrests by involved officers, development of new identification protocols. The report's appendices filled with transcripts, timestamps, and technical data. Body camera metadata confirmed no equipment malfunctions. The officers had simply chosen not to properly review Judge Marshall's identification. Most damning was the timeline Wong constructed, showing at least 7 distinct moments when the situation could have been resolved through basic procedural compliance. 9:15. Initial contact. AD check possible 1917. First mention of courthouse employment. 1920. Attempt to show credentials. 1925. Multiple witnesses confirm judge's identity. 1930. Processing desk opportunity. 1945. Booking procedure. 2015. Property inventory. Each missed opportunity represented a failure, not just of procedure, but of fundamental judgment. The report's conclusion was unavoidable. Initial determination: clear evidence of misconduct, resulting in civil rights violations, false arrest, and serious departmental violations. Recommended immediate administrative action pending full investigation and likely criminal charges. Wong attached her digital signature at 3:45 a.m., knowing this preliminary report would soon become evidence in what promised to be a landmark case of police accountability. The timestamp would mark the official beginning of what department veterans would later call the night everything changed. The official complaint filed with the Department of Justice landed on desks in Washington at precisely 8 a.m., its measured legal language masking a devastating critique of systemic police misconduct. Judge Victoria Marshall's signature, carrying the weight of 30 years on the federal bench, appeared bold and steady at the bottom of each page. United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division complaint, violation of civil rights under color of law, complainant, the Honorable Victoria Marshall, United States Court of Appeals, First Circuit, civil rights violations by Boston Police Department officers. Introduction. This complaint details severe violations of constitutional rights perpetrated by officers of the Boston Police Department on date. The incidents described herein represent not merely individual misconduct, but evidence of systemic failures in training, supervision, and departmental culture. James Chen watched his mentor compose the document in her chambers, her composure unwavering despite the events of the previous night. The morning sun streamed through the courthouse windows as she dictated each carefully chosen word. "This isn't about revenge, James," she explained, pausing to review a paragraph. "This is about ensuring that what happened to me doesn't happen to others who lack my platform and privileges." The complaint continued, its scope expanding beyond the immediate incident. Pattern and practice. The actions of Officers Callahan, Drake, Martinez, Williams, and Cooper reflect a broader pattern of constitutional violations within the Boston Police Department, including A. Systematic racial profiling in stop and frisk practices, B. Failure to follow established identification procedures, C. Escalation of non-threatening encounters, D. False statements in official reports, E. Violation of due process rights. Victoria's law clerks had worked through the night, pulling relevant cases, statistics, and department records. Each allegation in the complaint was backed by meticulous documentation and legal precedent. Specific violations. The complaint detailed each moment of the encounter, contrasting officer conduct with constitutional requirements. Despite clear opportunity and obligation to verify identity, officers chose escalation over investigation. Deliberate indifference to protestations of judicial status demonstrated conscious disregard for proper procedure. False statements in official reports suggest attempt to cover up misconduct. At 8:30 a.m., Victoria took a brief break from reviewing the final draft. Through her chamber's window, she could see media vehicles gathering outside the courthouse. Her phone continued to buzz with messages of support from colleagues across the federal judiciary. "Your Honor," Sarah Patel, her youngest clerk, entered with a fresh stack of research. "I've compiled the statistics on similar incidents in the district. The pattern is significant." Fee requested relief. The complaint's conclusion was both precise and far-reaching. Immediate suspension of all officers involved federal investigation of departmental practices, mandatory revision of training protocols, implementation of new oversight mechanisms, regular external audits of arrest procedures, establishment of independent review board. Victoria added a personal statement to the final section. "As both a federal judge and a citizen, I am deeply troubled by the events described herein. However, my personal experience serves merely as a window into a broader pattern of misconduct that affects countless citizens who lack my position and resources. This complaint seeks not only accountability for individual actions, but systematic reform to prevent future violations." At 8:55 a.m., Victoria signed the final page. The complaint would be simultaneously filed with the DOJ's Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Copies would reach the police commissioner's desk and the mayor's office within minutes. "It's time," she said, rising to don her robes. In 5 minutes, she would enter her courtroom, where 5 officers waited in dress uniforms, about to learn that this complaint was just the beginning of their reckoning. The document, with its official DOJ header and case number, represented more than just a legal filing. It was a promise to use her experience to force change in a system that too often confused authority with impunity. Officer Jason Cooper sat at his kitchen table at 4 a.m., staring at his resignation letter. The department letterhead seemed to mock him as he wrote, "To the Boston Police Department Command Staff, I am submitting my resignation, effective immediately. After last night's events involving Judge Marshall, I can no longer serve as a police officer in good conscience. 6 months ago, I graduated from the academy full of hope and pride. I believed I would make a difference. Instead, I participated in the wrongful arrest of a federal judge because I was too afraid to speak up when I knew something was wrong. I had Judge Marshall's ID in my hands. I saw it was official. But when my superior told me to ignore it and keep processing her, I obeyed. I watched her dignity stripped away. I heard her calm, reasonable protests dismissed. I saw the casual disrespect, the assumptions made about her because of her race. This isn't about one mistake. It's about a culture that teaches rookies like Me to stay quiet, follow orders, and never question senior officers. It's about learning to write reports that protect officers instead of telling the truth. To Judge Marshall, I am deeply sorry for my part in your mistreatment. You deserved better from those sworn to protect and serve. I will cooperate fully with any investigation into this incident. I want to help make sure this never happens to anyone else. Jason Cooper Badge, 8742. Lieutenant Chen found the letter on her desk when she arrived at 6 a.m. She'd seen many resignation letters over the years, angry ones, bitter ones, defensive ones. But this was different. This was raw truth from a young officer whose idealism had shattered against reality. Cooper had also sent copies to Internal Affairs, the district attorney, and Judge Marshall's office. He knew there was no going back. In the break room, other officers whispered about Cooper's betrayal. But in their eyes, Chen saw something else, fear, because deep down they knew Cooper had spoken the truth they all tried to ignore. The letter would soon become evidence in multiple investigations. But its real power lay in its simplicity. One rookie officer choosing truth over loyalty, conscience over career, right over wrong. At 10 a.m., the Department of Justice launched a full investigation into the Boston Police Department. Their audit order was clear and direct. 2. Boston Police Department Command Staff. From DOJ Civil Rights Division, RE. Department-wide investigation following the wrongful arrest of Federal Judge Victoria Marshall. We are conducting a complete review of your department's practices. This investigation will include review of records, all arrest reports from the past 2 years, body camera footage, complaint records, training documents, use of force reports, staff interviews, all officers in the precinct, supervisors and commanders, training instructors, internal affairs staff, administrative personnel. Police Commissioner Reynolds read the order with growing dread. Within hours, federal investigators had taken over the department's largest conference room, turning it into their command center. They wheeled in computers, hard drives, and boxes of files, preparing for a deep dive into years of police records. By noon, the investigation had already uncovered troubling patterns. 68% of arrests involved minorities. Far above the city's demographic makeup, Officer Martinez had 6 previous complaints of excessive force that were never properly investigated. Sergeant Callahan had approved numerous arrest reports with obvious problems. The department's civil rights training hadn't been updated in 8 years. Body camera footage often contradicted written reports. The investigation team posted their schedule on the conference room wall. Week 1, gather all records and evidence. Week 2, interview all personnel. Week 3, review findings. Week 4, present reform requirements. Weeks 5 to 12, monitor changes. They also demanded immediate changes, new rules for checking IDs, stricter supervision of arrests, better body camera policies, updated civil rights training. Regular reviews of officer conduct. An investigator named Sarah Chen made a disturbing discovery while reviewing old files. "Look at this," she told her supervisor. "The same problems that led to Judge Marshall's arrest show up in hundreds of other cases, but nobody ever faced consequences." Commissioner Reynolds watched the investigators work, knowing his department would never be the same. What started with one wrongful arrest was now exposing years of bad practices and cover-ups. "This isn't just about 5 officers anymore," the lead investigator told him. "This is about fixing a broken system." The commissioner looked at the growing pile of evidence on the conference room table. Judge Marshall's arrest hadn't just exposed one night of bad judgment. It had cracked open the door on years of systematic problems that could no longer be ignored. "We are going to examine everything," the investigator continued. "Every complaint, every arrest, every report, no stone unturned. And then we're going to rebuild this department's practices from the ground up." For the first time, Reynolds understood the true scope of what was coming. This wasn't just an investigation, it was a complete overhaul of how his department operated. And it all started because 5 officers hadn't bothered to check a judge's ID. 3 weeks after Judge Marshall's wrongful arrest, the police department released its official disciplinary decisions. The document was direct and severe. Disciplinary actions. Boston Police Department case, Judge Marshall incident, Sergeant Michael. Callahan fired immediately, loses pension, can never work as a police officer again. Faces criminal charges for civil rights violations, additional charges for lying in police reports. Officer Ryan Drake, fired immediately, cannot work as police officer. For 3 years, faces criminal charges for using excessive force, must pay fines. Officer Steve Martinez, fired immediately, cannot work as police officer for 5 years. Faces criminal charges for civil rights violations, must pay compensation too. Victims Officer Derek Williams, suspended for 6 months without pay, must complete new training. On probation for 2 years, receives written warning. Officer Jason Cooper, resignation accepted, can apply to return after 2 years if he completes extra training. No charges due to his cooperation and honesty. The document also listed changes that would start immediately in the department. New rules for all officers. Checking IDs. Must verify ID multiple ways. Supervisor must approve any arrest involving ID questions. Body cameras must be on during all ID checks. Using force. Must try to calm situation first. Must take breaks during tense situations. Must report all uses of force immediately. Suspended immediately if rules broken. Training requirements. Monthly classes on civil rights. Regular practice with real-life scenarios. Updates from judges and lawyers. Classes on working with diverse communities. Supervision. Supervisors must be present for all arrests. Regular review of body camera footage. More frequent performance reviews. Better tracking of problem officers. Judge Marshall added a note to the document. These punishments are severe because the officers broke their oath to protect and serve. But this is also a chance to make real changes in how our police department works. Success will be measured not just by the punishments given, but by the improvements made to prevent this from happening again. The final page had a warning for future officers. This case shows that having a badge means being responsible to protect people's rights. It does not put you above the law. Any officer who acts like these 5 did will be fired and prosecuted. Police Commissioner Reynolds signed the document at 3 p.m. As copies went out to every officer in the department, he knew this marked a turning point. The old ways of doing things were over. From now on, every officer would be held accountable for their actions. Post it in every precinct, he ordered. I want every officer to see what happens when they abuse their power. The message was clear. What happened to Judge Marshall would never be allowed to happen again. The department would change, or more officers would face the same consequences. 1 month after Judge Marshall's arrest, the Boston Police Department introduced its new training manual. The thick blue book represented a complete overhaul of how officers would do their jobs. Boston Police Department. New Officer Training Manual. Protect, Serve, Respect. Section 1. Identification Procedures. The manual's first pages told the story of Judge Marshall's arrest as a warning. It included pictures of her federal ID, the one the officers had ignored, and explained how one failure to check identification had changed the entire department. Every officer now had to follow the triple check rule. Ask for ID. Read it carefully. Verify it with dispatch. If someone claimed to be a public official, officers had to call their office to confirm. Wait for confirmation before taking any action. Keep body cameras on throughout. Have a supervisor present. Section 2. Stopping and questioning. The new rules were crystal clear about bias. No stops based on race or appearance. Must have specific reason to suspect crime. Cannot use suspicious behavior without details. Must explain reason for stop to citizen. Must call supervisor if citizen protests. Officer Williams, back from his suspension, read the manual during his retraining. Everything we used to do was wrong, he told his new partner. We were taught to act first and ask questions later. Now it's the opposite. Section 3, Use of Force. The manual sets strict limits. Force only as absolute last resort. Must attempt peaceful resolution. First, cannot use force over ID questions. Body cameras must be on. Must report all force used. Immediate review of all incidents. The training room. Officers practiced new de-escalation techniques. Role-playing scenarios taught them to slow down, listen, and solve problems without force. Section 4. Accountability. Every officer now wore new body cameras that couldn't be turned off during interactions with the public. The footage went directly to an independent review board that included community members, civil rights lawyers, retired judges, police supervisors. The manual's final section contained testimonials from people wrongly arrested in the past. Their stories showed officers the human cost of their mistakes. Lieutenant Chen, now in charge of training, gathered her officers for their daily briefing. This isn't just about following new rules, she told them. It's about changing how we think about our jobs. We're here to protect people's rights, not violate them. The changes were already showing results. Complaints down 60%, use of force down 75%, no wrongful arrests in 30 days, better community relations, more public trust officer. Cooper's resignation letter was included in the manual as required reading. His words about choosing right over wrong had become a powerful lesson for new recruits. Some veteran officers resisted the changes. We can't do our jobs with all these restrictions, they complained. But younger officers embraced the new approach, seeing it as a chance to rebuild trust with the community. Judge Marshall visited the training academy 1 month after the new manual was introduced. She watched officers practicing the new procedures and spoke to recruits about constitutional rights. What happened to me was terrible, she told them. But if it leads to real change, if it prevents others from suffering the same treatment, then some good will have come from it. The manual ended with a simple pledge that every officer had to sign. I swear to uphold the law fairly and equally, to respect the rights of all citizens, and to remember that my badge is a symbol of public trust, not personal power. 2 months after the wrongful arrest, Judge Marshall sat in her chambers reviewing the final judicial review document. This was the last step in a process that had transformed the Boston Police Department. Final judicial review case, Marshall v. Boston Police Department status, resolved. The judge read through the outcomes for each officer. Sergeant Michael Callahan, found guilty of civil rights violations, sentenced to 18 months in prison, banned from law enforcement for life, ordered to pay $100,000 in fines. Officer Ryan Drake pleaded guilty to lesser charges, 6 months house arrest, 500 hours community service, cannot work in law enforcement for 5 years. Officer Steve Martinez, found guilty of excessive force, 1 year in prison, must pay $50,000 in fines. Permanent ban from law enforcement. Officer Derek Williams, completed retraining program, back on duty with supervision. Regular reviews of his performance. Speaks to new recruits about lessons learned. Former officer Jason Cooper, testimony helped convict other officers working with police reform groups, applying to law school. Shares his story at police academies. The changes in the department were significant. New policies. Working arrests down 30%. No racial profiling. Complaints in 60 days. All ID checks, properly documented body cameras, always on community trust. Improving. Judge Marshall signed the final page, officially closing the case. But she added a note. This case was never about punishing individual officers. It was about fixing a broken system. The true test will be whether these changes last and prevent others from experiencing what I did. Later that day, she spoke to a group of new police recruits. "Your badge gives you authority," she told them, "but it also gives you responsibility. Never forget the difference." The courtroom where she'd faced the 5 officers 2 months ago was now being used to train officers on constitutional rights. Her case had become a required lesson at the police academy. Even the holding cell where she'd been detained had changed. A plaque outside now reminded officers, "Check ID, verify facts, respect rights. The person you're arresting might be a judge or someone who matters just as much." The final review noted one last detail. Officer Williams had stopped another officer from making a wrongful arrest the week before. When asked why, he said simply, "I learned the hard way what happens when we forget to respect people's rights." 1 year after Judge Marshall's arrest, the Boston Police Department released its 1-year follow-up report. The document showed how one incident had created lasting change. 1-year progress report. Boston Police Department Reform Initiative. 1 year of change by the numbers. Wrongful arrests down 85%, civilian complaints down 70%, use of force incidents down 65%, community trust rating up 50%, 0 racial profiling incidents in 6 months. Where are they now? Former officers, Michael Callahan, serving prison sentence, writes letters of apology to wrongfully arrested citizens. And Ryan Drake, completed house arrest, now works with police reform groups. Steve Martinez, in prison, agreed to share his story in training videos. Derek Williams, promoted to training officer, teaches new ID check procedures. Jason Cooper, starting his first year of law school, focused on civil rights department changes. New ID verification system in place. Body cameras record all stops. Community members help train officers. Regular civil rights refresher courses. Independent review board. Active Judge Marshall's impact. The case led to changes in police departments across the country. 20 other cities adopted Boston's new training program. Her story is now taught in police academies nationwide. Lieutenant Chen, reading the report in her office, thought about how much had changed. The old culture of us versus them was fading. Officers now saw themselves as part of the community, not separate from it. In her chambers, Judge Marshall kept a framed copy of her wrongful arrest report, not as a reminder of that rainy night, but as proof that change was possible when people faced hard truths. The report's final page included quotes from various people affected by the changes. A new recruit. We learn about Judge Marshall on day 1. Her case teaches us to never assume, always verify, and always respect rights. A community leader. A year ago, people feared the police. Now they're starting to trust them again. Officer Williams. That night changed everything. How we work, how we think, how we treat people. It had to change. A local resident. Officers actually listen now. They take time to understand situations before acting. Commissioner Reynolds added his own note. Sometimes it takes a crisis to force needed change. Judge Marshall's case showed us everything wrong with our system, but it also showed us how to fix it. Judge Marshall's closing statement in the report summed up the year of change. What happened to me was wrong, but the response to it was right. Real change comes when we admit mistakes, learn from them, and work to do better. This report shows that change is possible when there's will to make it happen. The last page showed 2 photos side by side. The old police badge with authority, the new one with protect, serve, respect. Below them was the department's new motto. The badge is a symbol of trust, not power.